to Morgan State University's SA+P School of Architecture and Planning lecture series for the 2020-2021 year. It's our pandemic year, but so we have the opportunity to have a lot of people coming in to sit in with the Zoom meetings, and I'm sure many of you have been using Zoom. Anyway, with that, what I'd like to do today is introduce you to two colleagues here in the DC area that have done an outstanding installation on many of the politics and social issues that we're looking at on day to day.
Sorry, Coleman, can you unmute?
Oh, you guys missed my phenomenal entry. Okay, so we'll start all over. So again, welcome everyone as far as coming to Morgan State University's 2020-2021 lecture series. During the pandemic year, we're doing the conferences online, and this is coming from the School of Architecture and Planning. And so I'd like to introduce this year, our second in a series of our lectures is Dayton Schroeter, AIA, and Julian Arrington, AIA, Associate AIA. And to give you background on Dayton, Dayton is a design principal who has championed design justice advocacy throughout his career at Smith Group. As a leader of the firm's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, his charge has led design projects that address the systemic injustice that architecture and planning have perpetrated for historically disenfranchised communities of color. Leveraging his tenuous passion for design justice with authenticity and creativity, he's currently leading anti-racism efforts in design projects, including an installation called Society's Cage, which we hope to see today, that sheds national awareness of the intersectional effects of racism on our society's collective health, safety, and welfare. Hopefully many of you have got a chance to see the installation on the mall in August. And I believe it's, I don't know, I'll let them explain if it's still up or not. But Julian Arrington, again, Associate AIA, is a lead designer in the Smith Group in DC. He's a in the DC's Cultural Studio. A proud graduate of Howard University, Julian has shaped concepts for multiple museum projects, including a museum to address the history of slavery in Richmond, Virginia, the Universal Hip Hop Museum, the Museum of Pop Culture, and others. The proponent of community-informed design, Julian has helped to lead stakeholder engagement efforts to craft designs that reflect the goals and aspirations of people that they service. So without further ado, if you could please welcome both Dayton and Julian as they go into their presentation. So thank you. We have Julian and Dayton.
I'm going to try to present here from my screen.
Okay.
Give me just a second to get set up. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Awesome, great. So thanks everyone. Again, my name is Dayton Schroeter. I'm an architect principal with the Smith Group in Washington, DC. So Julie and I will walk you through Society's Cage today, give you an overview of the project. what inspired it, the process, and really our experience and takeaways from that experience. But before we get into it, I just sort of wanted to start with an overview of our firm, Smith Group, and just tell you a little bit about what we do, just to kind of give you a little bit of frame of reference for who we are. We're the oldest AE firm in the country. We have about 15 offices nationwide and one in Shanghai, China. We are a diverse practice with studios, focused on commercial work. So that's essentially everything from office to residential to mixed use developments. We do healthcare, science and tech, higher education, government work, and of course, cultural work. And each studio essentially has a dedicated interior design group as well. So that's sort of a fundamental part of our practice. We're an integrated practice, so we're more than just architects. We specialize in architecture, interiors, urban planning, campus planning, mechanical, electrical, civil, structural engineering, lab planning. We do it all. Fire protection. We kind of do it all under one roof, as we like to say. Our local practice consists of a workplace studio responsible for the workplace or commercial work that we do. So not only do we sort of are invested in this idea of an integrated practice, but we curate leadership essentially in the work that we do around education, exhibit design, design thinking, philosophies. We have a dedicated technology studio. We essentially do it all. And I also didn't want to sort of leave you with just sort of generic overview of what we do. I thought this might even be a good opportunity to maybe discuss or show you some of the work that we've actually touched and been personally involved with before we get into things. So, the mantra of our company is design a better future, and it's basically built on three fundamental tenets, right? It's placemaking, sustainability, and innovation. And I don't have time to go into all of that. Like, hopefully we can get invited to come back and maybe talk a little bit more about what that means. But this first project is the DC Water headquarters. This was a 150,000 square foot office building for DC Water. It's meant to be an administrative office building to help them consolidate all of their remote offices that were scattered throughout the DC area. This is a great example of innovation, and will feature the first commercial application of a sewage heat recovery unit. That essentially means that we're heating and cooling the building with sewage. So when it's currently done. I was actually wrapping up some paperwork today for LEED, and it will be certified and will be literally one of the most sustainable buildings in the country when that paperwork is officially filed. Next project is the Levin building. This was a neuro and behavioral science building at the University of Pennsylvania that was completed back in, 2016, roughly 2016, 2017. Again, a great example of placemaking, I think, in many regards. On the boards, also, this is the National Slavery Museum at the Lumpkin Slave Jail / Devil's Half Acre in Richmond, Virginia. This will be a 100,000 square foot building, museum building built around the archaeological remains of the Lumpkin Slave Jail, which was an auction site that essentially functioned in Richmond, Virginia from 1844 to 1865, essentially right until the end of the Civil War. So looking forward to that. And if you want to learn more about that project, you could actually go to lumpkinsjail.org and check out that website to learn more about that. Another on the board project is the Universal Hip Hop Museum. This will be a 50,000 square foot interior interpretive space to celebrate the history and culture of hip hop. The museum will occupy a portion of the ground floor and the entire second floor it's called the Bronx Point development. And it's just a few blocks south of Yankee Stadium. So that project is also currently on, well, it's currently on hold for fundraising, but we're hoping to start that back up sometime in December. So that gives you a little bit of taste of some of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis as architects, and kind of just wanted to kind of give you that little bit of background before we just jumped into Society's Cage, full turkey, cold turkey. So so with that, I want to shift focus to Society's Cage and really give you the background of that project. Society's Cage was not a Smith Group project. I think there's been a lot of misinterpretation of the project as being something that was authored by the firm. This was actually a grassroots effort born within our office by a group of architects who sort of came together in the aftermath of the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor murders. We essentially wanted to do something to contribute to the discussions happening in our profession, and in the society at large, as we all reckon with institutional racism and white supremacy. We've been conditioned to, as a society, to believe and think of the contemporary murders of unarmed African Americans as anomalies, and we sort of tend to think of the cops as bad apples, but Society's Cage was an opportunity to really, contextualize these murders within the 400-year history of state violence in America, and really explore the roots and core of state violence. I'll just say all of that there. This was essentially a timeline of our full efforts for the project. It was a very short order project. We got started in early June, shortly after the George Floyd death. And in less than 3 months, we literally conceived of a concept. We became our own client. We secured a physical site. We fabricated the installation. We built the fundraising platform, a website, and we commissioned a musical soundscape for the experience. So all of that was done in fairly short order and in miraculous timing. Usually a project like this, we would be working on this for 1.5 years, if this was done in a sort of traditional way. This was I like to describe this as a process-driven design, where the resulting aesthetic was driven by data, and the data was driven by questions. And the first fundamental question that we asked ourselves was, what is the value of Black life? What societal structures impact Black life? What are the historic patterns of those structures? What are the racial and gender discrepancies inherent in those patterns? And so those questions ultimately led us to the institutions of lynching, mass incarceration, capital punishment, and police killings. And I like to say that the resulting architectural and sculptural form of the pavilion is social and political in nature, because the questions that we asked were social and political in nature. And with that, I'll turn it over to Julian to talk a little bit about the concept. I think you're on mute, Julian.
There you go. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Julian Arrington, architect with Smith Group. So I just wanted to walk you through the concept, or rather delve into the concept. So it's really about data, as Dayton sort of prefaced the discussions in regards to the concept. But the genesis of the form in many ways was a cube. And then what we tried to do here is really sort of, put facts on display and intersect basic notions that people sort of perceive our society as. So the cube is sort of representational of this idea of perfection and purity, and its simplicity in nature sort of suggests this equitable societal construct. And the data that Dayton previously described is what articulates this void, which is actually the triangulation of 4 data sets that form a surface over your head, or sort of form the ceiling surface above you as you sort of transcend through this or meander through the space. And the void is symbolic of this struggle. So you could actually feel the gravity and feel the weight. And it's this sort of physical, factual form that in many ways also achieves all these metaphors of weight and oppression, and this feeling of sort of having this force of systemic racism and institutional violence over your head. And the way we articulated this cube was using bars. The bars we found are a good way to sort of represent the data sets that we were using, but also had a lot of nuanced qualities to them that sort of represented the societal constructs and the institutions that we're talking about. If you think about mass incarceration in prison, or you think about cages, you think about sort of trees and the foresty qualities of sort of being without bounds. So one in four bars they don't touch the ground, but we sort of suggest they do. But the idea there is really that 1 in 4 Black men over the course of their life are expected to be incarcerated. So as you meander through the space, there's physical impediments that, in theory, that you cannot sort of get past. So it's there to sort of suggest this idea of it's not a linear thing. It's something that you're going to have to sort of make your way through. And then the data is sort of the representation of the gravity, as I described before. You go to the next slide. So this was our early rendering. As you'll see later in the presentation, the rendering looks very similar to the photographs, which I guess a lot of times, it's not necessarily what happens. But 2 primary goals of this presentation, of this design, are education and empathy. And not only do we want to give people an emotive opportunity to sort of meander through the space, but we want to present them with information and facts. So you're saturated with information and unarguable, undeniable realities. So as you can see on the periphery or the perimeter of the installation, there's text that's laid there. And basically what that is there's graphics that relate to each data set, that being mass incarceration, civilian killing by police, lynching, or capital punishment. And what we have there is we have a fact that's sort of right in your face, bold, all about the data. Then we go into detail and start talking about the stories of victims, or even a more specific account of how somebody was affected by a form of state violence. Another thing I like to talk about when we look at this rendering is this idea of even in the articulation artistically, we're talking about color and this idea of really giving people this idea of within space, there's a moment of color and moment of clarity, because this is all about reflection and contemplating with realities. So it's kind of like a sanctum. As you go into the next slide, you'll see that it's an emotive experience. Sorry, Dave, you go to next. Yeah, it's an emotive experience, and as you get inside, there's a separation from the inside and the outside. And once you guys visit, I know everybody will visit. You'll see that there's also these beautiful acoustic qualities that echo and sort of heighten this idea of a threshold. So once you get inside, it's an opportunity to separate yourself and really contemplate and think. And what we did on the floor, as you can see in the spaces, the path is inscribed or laid with luminaires who are speaking on different aspects of state violence. And their voices, this submerged voice, as we like to sort of describe metaphorically, is a guide through the space. And it works in tandem with the lighting. There's actually 50 lights that are scattered across the ceiling surface as a means of wayfinding, sort of a reference to slaves finding refuge in the forest and following the North Star to freedom. On the sort of flanking those quotes are names of victims of state violence. The intent there was there's actually a little bit short of 10,000 names of victims, and it's almost like a texture. A lot of people didn't, or say they didn't notice that there was names until they actually got into the space, which is definitely the intent. The intent was really to sort of drive this idea home of the breadth of all the victims. Is really about overwhelmingness, sort of giving the impression of how lasting this legacy of state violence is.
Yeah, and I'll just add on too. I mean, so in many ways, with regards to the two interpretive experience, the exterior experience that's more focused on education was meant to be a sort of emotional trigger. You know, it's the idea of presenting people with facts and history that they don't necessarily have to deal with every day, or may not even be aware of, related to these four themes of state violence, to kind of move people emotionally. And the idea is that once the visitor completed that educational experience on the exterior edifice of the pavilion, they would then enter onto the interior. And the idea for the interior is that there would be a participatory, emotive experience where we essentially encourage visitors to hold their breaths for as long as they can, in reference to the 18 minutes and 46 seconds that George Floyd suffered at the hands of police. Then to pull out their cell phones and record a short video stating how long they were able to hold their breaths, and to just provide a few statements for sake of contemplation and reflection in the moment. Then to upload that video to social media, their respective social media, with the hashtag Society's Cage. And the idea behind that was to not only build an opportunity for empathy, as Julian alluded to, but also to transcend the cage itself, and to be able to share these stories, for people to be able to share these stories and dialogue with friends and families, to kind of go beneath the surface layer of conversation that's often had in the aftermath of these police shootings. It's the idea of arming people with information and data so that they can have better informed conversations with friends and family.
And you'll see later the material that's articulated, I think, is well represented in the photos. So we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah. So these are just the next series of slides. I'll just kind of go through in quick sequence, because it's a lot. But the idea is that these were essentially photographs of the installation process on the National Mall, which was our first installation site for the project. So I'll kind of flip through in random as I kind of talk over the slides. But the installation was designed to be non-site specific. We designed it in a vacuum, and initially this was intended to be a grassroots effort. We were, in my mind, we would just go to Home Depot, source materials, maybe go to the firm to try to get a couple $1,000, or a couple local companies in DC to try to finance our efforts. And the thought is that we could find a local fabricator and install this on our own, crowdsource the labor and do it on our own. But we quickly ran into the reality of being in a COVID world. And so the idea of a group of, crowdsourcing a group to kind of work on something didn't really work for us. And so that was sort of one big variable. We approached the city, the mayor's office. They were in DC. They were very supportive of us, and we're really trying to look for creative ways to support the project. But DC, as you know, is still in stage 2 recovery phase, in the stage 2 recovery phase for COVID. And so there are no public permits being administered by the city, even to this day. So we could not there were no sites in DC where we could actually that could actually host the pavilion. You know, in our minds, this would have been best served at Black Lives Matter Plaza, but we could not get that because it was all public space. So the mayor's office, you know, recommended that we approach the National Park Service, and we essentially went through a standard application process with the Park Service. They didn't have the same restrictions that the city of DC had with regards to permitting. And so we were able to secure this site due to a cancellation, I believe. I believe, you know, because of COVID, a lot of the planned activities that were, you know, would normally occur on the mall and would normally take you years or months to try to get a spot were canceled. So we were immediately able to kind of get this premier spot right on the mall. And so these are just some photographs. Hopefully you've been looking as I've been talking in the background, just showing our erection. This was installed as we were designing the pavilion. Maybe a month into the process, we learned of the 2020 March on Washington. So we thought it would be very fitting to be able to put something or have something in place for the 2020 March on Washington. In the spirit of promoting racial and social justice. And so that sort of became our charge. And I think when that came on our radar, what did we have, 5 weeks? I think we were like 5 weeks out from the March on Washington. And at that point, we hadn't secured a fabricator. We were still designing. We had no site. And so it all came together really all in the last 5 weeks or so. In the foreground of this picture, you could actually see the actual rods themselves, the steel pipes. I think there's roughly 500 that form the installation. So it was a very quick process that came together in very quick succession, very quick fashion. This is a photograph of Julian actually putting the last pipe, plugging it into the hole. Because they're all hung from below. There's essentially a pin mechanism, and you essentially just insert these things through the sleeves, these holes that are in the roof structure, and it just sort of holds in place by sake of gravity. And so you could sort of see actually, and that's our team that's sort of amassed onto the side. We're sort of out there. So this was about a two-day process to get it all installed. Our fabricator and installer was a guy by the name of Eric Groening, who has a shop in Maryland, a local shop. He also functioned as our installer. So we were able to kind of do it all locally. Eric is also an architect. He has not only an architecture firm, but a fabrication shop. So there was the translation from design intent and the fabrication drawings that we did were pretty much seamless. You know, he understood us, he understood our language. That's actually him in the green shorts with the fist up in the blue mask. So it was a pretty seamless process, and it came together very, very succinctly for the time that we had.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add just to the what do you call it, the build, just for, you know, everybody on the call, I think for students and people in school as well, just to think about how the process of the design and how it was manifested physically. It was a really quick process. The installation was actually, it was all Rhino sort of generated. If you talk about 3D modeling, and the previous photo, I think, sort of depicted this idea of how the photo before, where the rods are laid out on the ground, they're actually all ID'd each. So what happened here is we laid them out by row, and each row A through I believe, had a different number, and just gave him the correct orientation. Everything sort of fell in place. So it was all sort of conceptualized, well, it was conceptualized outside of 3D, but it was all put together from the standpoint of ease of installation.
Yeah, we also, another point to mention, the lighting component that you saw in some of the renderings, and you'll see in some of the photographs, was all installed by our team. Here you can actually see Doug, who's another design principal in the firm, volunteering. He's up on the roof, helping to install all those 50 lights. So this was a very sort of grassroots kind of functioning effort. We did kind of have Eric on board to kind of assemble the core installation and substructure or superstructure, but we in fact were the ones that sort of came in and installed some of the infrastructure, both lighting, speaker infrastructure, and all the electrical wiring. And it looks very simple when you look at the installation, the finished product, but it was a very complicated process and time-consuming process to get it all worked out.
So we'll try to not speed through it, but we'll try to get through these so we can get to Q&A. But as Dayton sort of mentioned before, it's non-site specific, but as you can see, this is I'm stealing a soundbite from Dayton. It's a site of icons and symbol, like it's full of symbols. You have the monument, sort of due east, am I right, or south? And then you have to the north,
to the west, and then the capitals to the east.
Yeah, there you go. And then
Trump hotels to the north.
Flanked by the Trump Hotel, and then as you can see, there's a nice juxtaposition with the African American Museum. And no, the colors weren't intended to be similar, but it's a happy happy result. I guess speaking of materiality, it was really this idea of the weather, sort of depicting the weathering institution with the weathered steel. It's actually electrical conduit that was artificially aged or artificially patinaed with some kind of, I forgot what kind of acid Eric used, but essentially to get the rust. And the rustic qualities are symbolic of, in many ways, of not only the institution, but you think about like the melanin and the variation of colors as you look at the pipes, the rods, sort of depicting this idea of the diaspora. So I personally feel, I'm not sure how that DC installation in particular, it's the first of many, but I think it was very successful. This image right here, just daytime image, and I think it really does a good job of sort of articulating not only how the space was used, but also you can see how the data is sort of represented in the interior of it.
And I'll add on there too, I think, because it's probably important to mention in the times that we're in, but one of the goals in choosing the materiality was to choose a medium that could communicate data. There were early iterations of the concepts that we developed that were sort of made up of a sense, these sort of planar elements, and there was one where we had sort of these planar elements that were sort of cut to form a topography to kind of represent the data. There was another one that essentially was made up of sort of this cube structure, but ultimately we settled into the pipe aesthetic, because one of the things that allowed us to do was to keep the pavilion open, keep it an open air. Part of the concern when we lean towards the cubes and the planar approach was that it created walls, and so that was not necessarily the best approach that was that we wanted to kind of take in the era of COVID. We wanted to choose a material that was going to be open air and allow air to kind of flow through. So I'm sorry, I just thought I'd mention that. I know it came up early on. I
think that Dayton actually took the photo on the left. it's a good, excuse me, it does a good job of sort of depicting the materiality, but also shows the layering on the floor. I'm not sure how we got this photo. I think you were on a ladder, right?
Yeah, I was on a ladder.
And then the photo on the right, you could kind of see how people take their time in the space and really took the opportunity to read the text on the floor. And you could also see, as I mentioned before, that from the exterior, it's not as legible as it is from the interior. So it's this element of surprise and really a balance of being inside and outside of the space.
Yeah, and as Julian mentioned here, you could kind of see all the different quotes from the luminary, kind of voices throughout the history of the African diaspora that have spoken to, the issue of state violence, whether it be lynching, mass incarceration, capital punishment, or police killings. And that sort of marks your pathway as you meander through the pavilion for the most part. And then off to the side, as Julian mentioned, are over 10,000 names of individual victims. So if you were sort of in close proximity to the text, you'd see that it states the individual's name, the year they were murdered, and the particular institution that was part of their demise. Just another photograph, sort of taken within the space. Just kind of gives you a sense of the sort of the formal qualities in the expression of the interior. As Julian mentioned, I mean, this was in many ways, I often describe this project as a literal expression of racism. We took the ugliness of racism and tried to render it in a beautiful way to draw people in to begin to have uncomfortable conversations about racism and white supremacy. And so essentially, this space is in many ways we see as a sacred space, a sanctum. And when you're in here, you are literally underneath the literal weight of institutional racism. That form and shape of that ceiling, that undulating form, is literally a mathematical average of statistical graphs that are transcribed on each facade, and that data is essentially combined, triangulated, and averaged across the surface of that roof to sort of literally form a shape that is the literal result of the convergence of data around how African Americans have been impacted by these institutions. So it's literally the shape of racism. And just a close-up shot to the left. Being where this pavilion was sited, there were just a number of really powerful moments where, the demonstrators would come through and sort of stumble on this pavilion. Sometimes they knew it was there, sometimes they didn't. This also happened at the tail end of the first installation on the mall happened at the tail end of the RNC convention. And then the beginning of the 2020 March on Washington. So there was this amazing convergence of diverse groups of people, right? Kind of split along ideological lines. We had, Black, white, Latino, Asian, young people, older people from all walks of life were essentially drawn in, and for the most part, received the installation very, very well. So very proud of that experience.
So the installation, as we mentioned kind of earlier, had in some ways had two modes, or two what do you call it? Two
interpretive
modes.
layers.
So, yeah, exactly. So in the day, no, more so just the day versus the night.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah. So in the daytime, it was more of an object, and it was more about. I mean, it's always about the data, but it was about sort of the formal qualities, and you get a play of the shadows, and you get a play of the the form and the massing. And then the nighttime, it really became a space, and it became the opportunity for this place in the midst of all these icons. And we were sort of happily surprised by how dark the mall got at night. It was really beautiful how we'd have people sort of meander here and come here at any time of night from sunset to sunrise. So you get people showing up at 2 a.m. and they'll hang out here for like half an hour, taking their time.
And then there was also, we forgot to mention early on, a soundscape that we commissioned. There are 2 guys down at that work down at Tulane University. They're music teachers, and we essentially reached out early on in the conceptual design phase and commissioned them to create a 8-minute and 46-second soundscape. Again, in reference to the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that George Floyd suffered at the hands of police. And initially, when we were kind of thinking about that idea early on, you know, in my mind, it was, you know, we talked about sound, and I was thinking that it could just be sort of a repetitious tone that, you know, over time would intensify over 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And, you know, at the end of it, maybe there was a bell or something, and then it would just repeat. And the more that we thought about it, we saw it as an opportunity to actually bring on a musician to kind of really take that challenge on and interpret reinterpret this thing through sound. So the guys that came on board, they took it one step further and composed the soundscape into 4 parts. And each part of the soundscape is themed to correlate with one of the 4 themes of state violence. So if you listen closely, if you ever get a chance to see the installation, you'll kind of hear the subtle nuances and changes as the sound piece transitions from one phase to another. You want to speak to this, Julian?
Yeah, so as you can see, we had as Dayton sort of mentioned before, all types of demographics. We've had police officers show up here and really take the opportunity to read the information, it's not necessarily intended to be, this isn't like a confrontational thing. I mean, some people may make it that, but the intent really, to Dayton's point, is to sort of express this idea of acknowledgement and untold truths, because what we're doing here is telling the truth. And in a space where things are suppressed and ignored, it's hard to really get past it. And I think it was really beautiful how many different people took the opportunity to come here, sort of take in the information. And we've had so many different types of reactions. Well, one of Dayton's stories is one of my favorites, but a gentleman who admitted that he was complicit with racism, and he felt like this installation was sort of a catalyst to him in terms of him being able to really acknowledge his complicitness. And I've had stories of my own, and I was really moved. I was really moved by how other people were moved. And as you could see, sort of on the periphery of these images, that people took the opportunity. We put some of those flowers, I'm not gonna lie, but we actually had some people show up and put flowers and take the opportunity to give offerings, sort of in respect to the ancestors. Because in many ways, Dayton and I like to describe this installation as we were sort of a vessel of creativity for the sort of the ancestors who sort of suffered at the whelm of all these racist institutions. And we're just here to present users with the opportunity to take these facts.
Right. Yeah, I think in many ways we were trying to amplify the voice of the voiceless. You know, those who suffered at the hands of these abominable institutions, and use it as a teaching opportunity to you know, elevate our society. And we don't. This is interesting too. I know you saw Julian's. Well, you want to speak to this, Julian? I thought this was cool.
Yeah, this isn't staged, but in some ways, you'll see that it resembles one of the earlier renderings that we showed, where this mother was taking the opportunity to teach her son about the legacy, and I mean, the intent here is to disrupt the legacy. We want everybody to be in arms, but we know that before that happens, we have to talk. We have to settle these issues.
Yeah, and it's very reassuring as a creative when you envision, when you conceptualize space and you position people in your renderings, and you know in a way, in a very purposeful way, where you're envisioning how you want people to utilize the space, and then to kind of see it confirmed in reality, right? Is just very fulfilling as an architect, as an artist, you know, to see it utilized in the way that you hoped is, you know. So this was one of those examples. And then of course, this was never really intention. The intention behind the pavilion was never to be a venue for performance, but it just occurred to us. We were on the mall for roughly 2 weeks, and between was it August 28th to what was it? What was the takedown? The 12th. Yeah. So in that period of time, it kind of dawned on us there was perhaps another opportunity here for social injustice, social related art. And so we sort of envisioned this idea of performance art happening within the edifice, art that was sort of you know, correlated with some of the messaging of racial justice. And so we commissioned, this is Yari Delancourt on the left, a dancer. She did this beautiful interpretive dance piece, again, around the institutions of state violence in the pavilion to the soundscape that was done by UP and the guys down in Tulane. And so it was a beautiful night. And then we also had several spoken word artists come in, and it totally just opened up a whole new kind of creative chamber and opportunity for programming around this institution. Around the installation.
And
do you want to speak to
just
this?
to add, yeah, no, I was just going to add that we have a YouTube channel, and the dance performance is actually available on YouTube if anybody would like to view it.
Yeah. It's Julian in the pavilion. It's a nice shot. This shot I really like because it really kind of expresses the data. You know, you kind of see this nice elevational profile, and the juxtaposition of the Capitol building, I think, is really gorgeous. And that's it. I don't even know how we're doing on time. Sorry if we went over.
You're doing great on time.
Okay.
Do we have any questions? If you have one, just go ahead and type it in the chat box, or I'll set it up so you guys can unmute yourselves. Yeah, so if you want, you can either unmute yourself and ask your question out loud or just type it into the chat box.
Been a long way. I'd like to thank both Julian and Dayton for the presentation. I think it's a very powerful exhibit and installation. And hopefully, I understand that there's potential for doing one in the Baltimore area, if I'm correct?
Yeah. Yes. So there's no confirmed dates on when that might happen. We're eagerly hoping that it will happen before the end of this month, and perhaps we can occupy a space for a couple weeks. So we're in the process of trying to make that happen, but we can't make any information public yet until we have more specific information. But if you follow us on our social media, you know, we'll be sure to get the word out and try to publicize it as best we can.
So we have a couple questions in the chat box. The first one is, will you place this in other cities, which you've kind of just answered, but beyond Baltimore?
Yeah, so the idea, I kind of spoke to it in a very cryptic manner, but the idea here is that this is a traveling exhibit. The idea is this is gonna live in many different places and provide opportunities for, you know, interpretive reflections on state violence and race. And so principally, we see this going to sort of all the major cities, New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, New Orleans, Miami. But there's also an opportunity here to be able to use this installation to add voice to places where you know, critical conversations are being had around race and social justice. So we're also considering Tulsa as a site. You know, Tulsa is a city right now that's in a stage of reckoning around its legacy with the you know, the racial massacre that occurred there. And I know right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they are in the process of excavating a potential mass grave. So having an installation like this positioned within close proximity to that city, I think will be a great opportunity again for people to be able to start having these dialogues. We're also looking at places like Richmond, right? You know, Richmond, Virginia. This is, you know, the capital of the Confederacy. You know, you saw the toppling of the Confederate monuments on Monument Avenue, and everything that sort of happened in the last few months. And that city is in a critical point of reckoning as well. They're trying to figure out how do they move forward. How do they give people hope? How are they gonna you know, re-identify themselves, I guess, for lack of better terms, and really kind of create a vision for themselves as they go into the future. And so again, I think having an installation like this in close proximity to those cities is just I think an amazing opportunity to educate people, build empathy, but also to really go beneath the surface to make sure that the conversations are being had are substantive and based on history. The thing I like to say, you know, this installation in many ways is a fact-based installation, you know, based on data. It's not there's no opinion, there's no conjecture. This was really derivative of statistical, historic data graphs that describe how African Americans have been impacted. And I think that's especially important within the context of the political era that we all exist in, where, you know, facts no longer matter. And so, you know, having you know, artifacts and data to kind of substantiate our position on things is incredibly important in this society now. Sorry, I know this is an incredibly long-winded answer.
I was going to add that I mean, a large part of the effort is to travel it, and sort of in tandem, we've been fundraising, and we still are fundraising, and we're sort of hopefully working with agency from somebody else, hopefully soon, to help us move it around. We're always open to assistance in helping us sort of pass or move this installation around the world, or around the world, to sort of open discourse.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Julian just said, this is, yes, I forgot to mention, we are in fundraising mode for the project. We were gracious enough where, you know, Smith Group, the firm we work for, came on board. They got wind of what we were doing. Word traveled up the food chain, and the board made a decision to support us financially, and that is really what allowed us to transcend really what would have been a really crude grassroots installation, and really make this a professional installation. You know, they gave us a significant amount of seed money that they donated to begin to take this on, and that's essentially what enabled us to hire a professional fabricator and installer. So as part of our fundraising effort, we're essentially trying to pay ourselves back, but also in the spirit of education and empathy, we are also partnered with the Architects Foundation through the AIA, and are trying to raise fund for the diversity advancement scholarship, and that's essentially a scholarship program that is set up to provide tuition money to disadvantaged minorities. So we didn't want this to just be a social justice art project. We wanted there to be some direct action involved as well.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in real quick. We're starting to run out of time, but I think we can do about 3 more questions that I'll pull from the chat for you. A couple of them I believe you've already answered, so I just want to double check on the answers with you. The first one is just to confirm the installation's no longer in place on the National Mall, right?
No,
Yeah.
it was the last day was the 12th?
Okay, so we'll
Last
have
month.
to wait to see it until it goes up in another city, unfortunately. And then
Stay tuned. I have a feeling that it's gonna resurface shortly. In the span of possibly the next week. I just can't make any promises. But I'm hopeful that will happen. So again, follow us. Make sure you follow us on social media. We'll be sure to try to get the word out. But no,
okay, so that leads right into the next question. Somebody asked that if they don't participate in social media, is there any way for them to stay updated with what you guys are doing?
So we have a website, smithgroup.com, and then /societies, no apostrophe, societies -cage.
Okay, thank you
So
guys. We'll try and get that up in the YouTube
Can we put that in the chat, Julian?
Yeah, I can do that.
That would be great, and then I can get that into the YouTube notes. Okay, and then this last question is probably going to be a bit longer for the answer, although I do want to mention we had a lot of people saying in the chat they wanted you to know how gorgeous the installation is and how much they appreciate you guys doing this presentation for us.
Thank you.
Okay, so we had one more question. What advice would you give to young up-and-coming architects on how to utilize the platform of our profession to make such an impact as you all have done with Society's Cage?
I've been talking too much. That's yours, man.
I can start it and you can finish it. I'll just try to touch the point. So I'd like to preface it just by saying that I actually graduated in 2015, so I'm only like 5 years out of school. So I like to express a deal of relatability when it comes to that. By no means do I feel like I'm established in the profession, and I always like to express humility. So I mean, I come from it from the standpoint of somebody who one, I'm from Brooklyn, so I like to say what I feel, but two, always sort of open to hearing other people's thoughts and giving people other opportunities and building networks. And through those networks, it really gives you the opportunity for other people to want to also give you platform. And Dayton personally has been like a mentor to me since I got out of school. And in many ways, like where I am with this project and with other work that I do with the firm, I like to also credit to his ability to help my development. And I suggest that anybody in school, sort of at the root of it, get as much experience as you can. When you're in school, do your best to take the time you have, because time runs short when you graduate. No matter how much you think you have time, you don't have time. You won't have time in 5 to 10 years. So you'll have less and less time. But I just want to say, always follow your passions, and always do your best to be able to add to the conversations that are being had.
1,000% that everything Julian just said, co-sign, and thanks, Julian. I'm 20 years out the gate. I have a little bit more of experience than Julian. I'm a little older. But yeah, I would say, you know, I didn't start talking about social justice issues when the George Floyd situation happened. I've been invested, you know, emotionally, academically, and intellectually in social justice. I guess I can consider myself an activist. So I've always sort of been invested in this work. And you know, I think when you invest yourself in the work and you're passionate about it, I think what you'll find is that the opportunities will begin to they will find you. It's in many ways I'm just we're doing a lot of really powerful, fulfilling work. And Society's Cage was a project that you know, I said was very intense from a time standpoint. There was a span of maybe 5 weeks where we never had a break. We worked 7 days a week. I mean, I was texting. Sometimes we're trading text at 2 a.m. in the morning. You know, like it never stopped. But the beautiful thing about it is it didn't seem like work. It seemed the whole time that we were doing it, it was a passion project. It was something that felt like it needed to be done. And we felt like we were being fueled by something that was bigger than us, you know. And so I'd say, you know, follow your passions. It sounds cliche, but not only follow your passions, but invest in your passions, become knowledgeable about what you're interested in. I tell people all the time, you know, before I hire them, you know, I ask them, you know, what do you want from the art, from the profession, other than being a successful architect and doing great buildings? Like, what are you interested in? You know, what do you bring to the table in terms of your person and your personal interests? And so I think that that's fundamentally important in this profession. You have to also have interests and driving interests that are going to motivate you and push you into you know, these types of passion projects and create opportunities for you.
Okay.
I mean, we're doing one day we're doing one day we're dealing with you know, institutional racism and white supremacy in terms of projects we deal with, and then the next day we're dealing with hip hop. You know, like it's a beautiful thing. And you know, it's all passion work. So hopefully that answered the question, but
I think it definitely did. Thank you guys so much. You've given us so much information, and this has been really inspiring. I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over to Coleman so he can close us out and announce the next lecture in our series. I'm just going to really quickly mention that this lecture, as well as all of the other lectures in our SA+P lecture series, present and past, can be found on our YouTube page, which is linked to from the SA+P website. Thanks, Coleman.
Okay, thank you. So thanks again, Dayton and Julian, and we look forward to the future legs of this project and how it extends, which I believe can also extend globally, as was mentioned. But before I move on to sort of formal thanks with the clapping, I'd like to make an announcement that Kathleen Lane, who is a part of the Baltimore AIA organization, want to make sure that we let everyone know that the door is open. Baltimore is coming up. And so if you can visit the AIA Baltimore website to get that information. And also the next SA+P School of Architecture and Planning here at Morgan State University. The next lecture is going to be happening on October 20th at 12 noon. So it'll be on the same Zoom page that you're using now, same Zoom account. And so we hope to see you there. With that said, I'd like to give a wide welcome and say thank you very much for your presentation. I don't know if everyone can undo their sound or not.
Thank you.
Either clap or
I'll
share.
give you just a moment and I'll get everybody unmuted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like you guys are going to have to unmute yourselves. But if everybody wants to do that really quickly, I see most people have, yep, okay, I think we've gotten most people.
So if we can just give a nice round of applause. Appreciation. And we definitely hope to see you here again. We'd like to know more about your work, both personally and at your firm. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone.
Okay, and we will be in touch.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and close out the meeting. Bye.
All right, thanks a lot, Colleen. I appreciate your work.
Oh, no problem.